Hello, Capricorn. Welcome to your full moon astrology forecast. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you're here, Capricorn. So this astrology forecast is for Capricorn rising, Capricorn moon, Capricorn sun. Anyone with strong Capricorn, if you have a stellium of Capricorn in your chart, if you have progressed planets or objects or positions in Capricorn, there's going to be something here for you. But we are going to be reading this full moon forecast from the Capricorn rising perspective, as most horoscopes are actually written for. But Cap moon and then Cap sun are also going to get a lot out of this reading, because all of the relationships that are being made are still relevant to the Capricorn person in terms of the way they just move through their life and through the world. So without further ado, let's get right into the full moon. So we did the new moon astrology forecast for Cancer because that was where the new moon was. It was in Cancer along with Lilith. And so it's really Cancer and Capricorn both, because these signs are really not able to be understood fully without their diametric opposition. So Capricorn and Cancer just throughout the whole lunar month is being impacted right into the very essence of their identity, either who they are and identify themselves, their individual consciousness and how it grows, or the relationship in a societal way. So relationship domestically into relationship with society. These seventh house themes really bring out the person you are in these relationships and start the process of social identity. So for you, Capricorn, this full moon is still along that same axis, but now the moon is full in your sign. And with Pluto here, Pluto retrograde here, really finishing up its time in the sign of Capricorn, at least in Western astrology, Capricorn has been going through such a heavy, powerful transformation of self in complete alignment with the establishments, the governments, the institutions that Capricorn represents at a societal level, societal expression. It's also just in almost lockstep with the societal transformation that Pluto represents, right? So destruction, exposure, and the fallow period, and then the regeneration. And with the Pluto return of the U.S. Really active, like right now, as of yesterday, the retrograde Pluto, as we see here, passed over the actual point of the U.S. natal Pluto, right, which is at 27 degrees 34 minutes in its retrograde. So in some ways it feels like the birth of this nation, the United States. And when I say this, it's because that's where I'm at, and this is where my nationality lies currently. It feels like the water has broken, right? And so there is a point here where the contractions are going to start beginning, and the transformation process is going to be much more active when Pluto moves back over this area in its direct motion. So you want to keep an eye out for that as well, Capricorn, because this is directly related to you as a person, how you identify yourself. If you're a moon in Capricorn, the essence about how your inner emotional landscape, the nature of it. And if you're a sun Cap, well, this is when you are fully expressing who you are, right, from your heart as a Capricorn person. These are going through incredible, massive transformation. And Pluto's been in Capricorn for a long time, since 2008. So it's really about finishing up this cycle. So in this full moon, as we see here, not only is it an opposition between the moon in your sign, the sun in your seventh house of Cancer, we have Mercury involved, we still have Black Moon Lilith involved, all in the area of who you are in relationship, but we also have a mystic rectangle with the nodes of the moon. So the north node Rahu, the south node or Ketu in Taurus and Scorpio, your 5th and 11th. So as much as there is this tension between these 2 points, and most of it having to do with the moon and the nodes of the moon representing our soul's evolution and kind of karmic journey. This is wow. There is a lot of opportunity surrounding this full moon to really make the most of this tension without having to engage too much in the conflict, if you know what I mean, right? So you have all these sextiles and trines surrounding what otherwise is these two oppositions that meet in the middle. So I want to unpack this enough so that Capricorn, you understand, what these areas really represent, because they're going to come back into the conversation throughout the next 2 weeks, right? Because a full moon is a culmination point. We started with a new moon in Cancer, really establishing kind of the impressions and imitations of that which we want to grow into, and we start kind of acting like it, or at least starting to imitate it, right? This is what growth is all about. And so in terms of who you are in relationship, because that will fundamentally change when your identity changes, right? Because everything else beyond this is going to be shaping this very seed point of your personality, Capricorn. So there's been an establishment in some ways of growth and development along the lines of who you are as a person in relationships that is going along. And the moon over the last 2 weeks has moved through the top of your chart, which is social identity and social expression. So you've been emotionally and very personally tapping into all of who you are when it relates to social identity and expression. And as a Capricorn person, this is a big part of who you are, because the Capricorn person is the boss, right? They establish or exemplify or even just promote themselves in terms of leadership, a sense of structure, a sense of authority. There's responsibility that comes along with Capricorn, and not just to themselves, but to all who are engaged in the larger establishment. So going through this very deep transformation of establishment and the materium that we identify as reality has been coming right to the essence of who you are. And so as much as you may have made these intentions with the new moon, which is essential, right? Black Moon Lilith was involved, right? So it's an even deeper primal connection to the sacred goddess, the divine feminine, the keeper of the flame, as it were, the space, the infinite space of, or the medium, right? Of our sensitivity, our power is really in the sacred womb, so to speak. I mean, Cancer truly represents the vessel, right? The Holy Grail, the womb, the nurturing aspect, and the protective mechanism in order to allow for growth. So something has been not only initiated for you, Cap, in these area of relationship and societal identity, but also something that is tying you back to the very essence of life, right? And something that demands and will be expressed and heard in some way, and oftentimes it's very deep. And if we try to push it away due to shame and guilt, it tends to come back out in a much more dysfunctional compensation pattern. So, and I'm not suggesting that's what's happening here. It's that the last 2 weeks have shown the waxing moon going through social identity, and now to return to your sign, Capricorn, and a full illumination and awareness of, okay, what is it about me, right? How I feel about myself, a deep sensitivity and intuition about the identity, the subjective experience of I am, how that's been promoted and pushed into the world of I am, and what aspects need to be cleared away here in order to create space for relationship to grow, new relationship to grow. Because there's no doubt, Capricorn, that has been even since January of 2020, which is a big part of this full moon, because the full moon itself is now conjunct the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 2020 within a degree, right? 21, 22 degrees of Capricorn. So this is also a temporal marker, right? We're going back energetically connecting to the crystallization and the balancing accounts in some ways at an establishment level with this conjunction in 2020. So what have we learned, right? What has come to pass? What is a defeat? What is a success? And what can we learn from our defeats? Do we have the grace and nobility to let things go? And the full moon is just exactly what you need, Capricorn, to fully engage yourself and your subjective self in this way. And so, like I said, there's this mystic rectangle around this full moon with the nodes of the moon is showing the areas where the soul is really pulling you. Your soul is really currently, and the collective soul is really pulling you in order to evolve at that level, right? So you have your consciousness as a Capricorn, and knowing where all of these things are in your natal chart, just, make the story and the narrative that much more intricate and rich, right? This is why having personal readings and knowing your chart is really essential to understanding your story. But for Cap in general, the North Node, or Rahu, right, and Uranus and Mars, all in the 5th house of your voice, right? The 5th house is where your joy is expressed, where your passion is realized and shines brilliantly, where you feel a sense of thrill, excitement, romance. It has to do with children and playfulness. And it's truly where our heart is open and beaming. And so in terms of an esoteric experience, the 5th house is when the Kundalini is activated, right? Again, it's about the devotion that is experienced when we become a vessel for the divine or the sacred or the beloved, right? And it is the sun shining, right? The center of our solar system. And it represents your individual creative expression of who you are. So this is the area for you, Cap, that is, where the soul is drawing you in order to learn and grow, where Uranus is right now, right? Stimulating awakening for all of us in the area of resources and value, and the material, natural harmonics of nature, of value, of meaning. And Mars here now, which is a tricky place right now, but is really, really powerful. It is at its detriment. Right? Mars is one of the co-rulers of Scorpio. So in Taurus, it is at its detriment, but it is in this position where Mars, if it can exercise some real strong patience and stable, industrious focus, boy, oh boy, so much can get done here. Now, Mars would prefer to be in Capricorn because there is a sense of momentum with Capricorn. It's cardinal Earth, right? Cardinal meaning there's this action or this movement identified. It is the unfolding of the fractal of nature that Capricorn is truly in its glory, and in the unfolding of time, right? In some ways, it's like the that last stage before moving into the 4th density to move through time. So it has its place, and it is a big part of how we establish ourselves in a material existence, is aligning ourselves with this geometric pattern of Capricorn, whatever it is, the matrix, right? So Cap, it's really in, I feel like, this 5th house and this Taurus energy where you really find yourself. And it's not been easy. And there's a big conjunction that's happening on August 1st in this area with all of these players, Mars, Uranus, and the North Node, that are coming together to create a space in order for something spontaneous to come through. So there's a lot of potential here that if you can tap into it at this full moon and identify that this, especially with the nodes, right? It's mostly with the nodes at a soul level, and the moon tapping into her own nodes. This is a little bit easier than probably any other of the bodies because it's her nodes, right? And the moon is our connection to the our intuition and the infinite in a lot of ways, and that part of ourselves that is our emotional landscape. And so the soul is, functions as a result of what's going on at that level, or at least our ability to connect in with our soul is through the medium of the lunar energy. So the South Node is really the only action that's up here for you, Capricorn, other than now things are starting to move into the realms of social identity and expression. But up until very recently, it's all been at the bottom of your chart. It's all been about you. And there's been a lot that has been learned here. And there will be more, right? I mean, Pluto's retrograde. Saturn, your ruler, retrograde in the 2nd house. Neptune is now retrograde. Wow. We'll get into that. And then Jupiter and Chiron by the end of this lunar cycle, right? By the time we get to the next new moon, which will be in Leo, even Jupiter and Chiron are going to be retrograde. So all of the very basic identity issues that are being impacted by large transpersonal energies are all going to be retrograde very, very soon. So also keep in mind these areas are going through a very deep internal process now. And what is more accessible is Mars, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun, and of course the Moon, and they're all moving obviously forward. In fact, there'll be a Mercury-Sun conjunction or a cazimi. Venus will move into your 7th house. So it's going to start becoming a little clearer in some ways what it's all been for, and coming into a new dimension of who you are in relationship as a function of what's been going on at these much larger and levels, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, even Chiron and Jupiter, impacting like the very essence of your identity and where your emotional life really resides. And I suspect Capricorn, especially with Chiron and Jupiter stationing retrograde in the next 2 weeks, you're about to go through a pretty intense inner journey here of discovering who you truly are in relation to your inner power and what has been holding you back. And that's going to be a big part of the Chiron conversation. So it has a lot to do with your voice and your passion, your expression, right? Your lust for life. And perhaps there are really rapid changes. And now with Mars here, there's a really strong energy to go for something, maybe take a risk, and in Taurus, what's good about this and the fact that you are a Capricorn person is you know when to act, right? It's about the right timing. It's about being on it, right? In the flow of things so that you know when to act and when to take a calculated risk. And if you are a Lyran Starseed to boot, oh my gosh, then you are really tapping into that Starseed origin, because this is where the full moon, 21 degrees Capricorn, that is right in Lyra. So there is a lot of this really incredibly powerful leadership energy, but also the essence of what it means to be a leader is absolutely going through massive transformation. And so that means you are going through transformation as well. So here is the full moon in and of itself. Mercury is here as well. Like I said, it's going to start coming into a sextile with Uranus. So keeping an eye on just this relationship of the 7th and 5th house in general, just like this full moon has the sun and the node in a sextile, Mercury in Uranus in a sextile. So without the lust for life, without a sense of passion, a sense of creative expression, to want to put yourself out there in some way, right? To showcase yourself, to be the center of your own stage, right? This is a very and to be your flower blooming, whatever that is essential to offering yourself into the social identity, right? It is that is really creating that which is going to be offered, right? And the 6th house is a big part of this, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that because Venus is going to be in a trine to your ruler, Saturn, which is essentially just is really just anchoring you. Talk about inertia, right? Especially in a retrograde. It's not even inertia now. It is like folding in, or the density in its own gravity is starting to implode on itself, which is what stars usually do when they're not able to balance the density and gravity with the pressure of their process of creating energy, right? Regardless of what framework, whether you believe or know the sun to be nuclear fusion, if you believe in electrical universe, which means we have an electrical sun, regardless, there's still a wavelength that is coming off. And it's the same thing in terms of establishing your security and your sense of self in a lot of ways in the environment that you are in, right? And this can be really really stubborn. And I hope it isn't, because what you're going to find here is that rather than stubbornness, this trine to Venus in your sixth house, Venus in Gemini, which is going to be pretty much exact at the time of this full moon, as you see, there's a lot of value and meaning, right, to these really difficult trials. And the sixth house is where it all happens, right? It's fundamentally in a quincunx, or a 150-degree angle to any first house, the sixth house is. And this is what I say is where we really get our shit together. We organize ourselves and our resources. We start to put the puzzle together. It's mutable earth. Virgo is the sixth house. So for the Capricorn person, the real challenge is in the mutable air. So it's a good thing that Mercury rules this house too, because it allows for an engagement with the process of the intellect, or the mind, cognition, rationality, empiricism, and discovery is a big part of the Gemini archetype. And Capricorn is so into the unfolding of the materium and being a conscious participant in that the real challenge here to master oneself is to give the capacity for this discovery, exploration. And so Venus, it's not been easy with her in Gemini in some ways, because she's really embodying the back and forth and the dialectic in relationships, in health, in the sense of symmetry, what that means, how we can find it, right, when it's consistently always just a endless back and forth of this ones and zeros, up and down, off and on, right? And there, for the Cap person though, there is this sense, if we can really lovingly kind of prune away the things in our everyday routine, or our practices, our devotions, our service work, maybe pruning it in and of itself is the service, is the work, is the training, is the dedication that the sixth house represents, right? It's the fifth house is where we discover that we love to perform, for instance. The sixth house is the day in and day out of practicing and perfecting your craft. So there's been a lot of this connection for this and a lot of meaning and value attributed to this process in a way of perfecting the craft of intellect and rationalism and empirical discovery and observation, all of these things that Gemini represents. And eventually you get to the point where you start to prune back the wild expansion, right? Eventually it has to consolidate into a purpose, rather than just wildly growing, mind wildly going everywhere. And this is in a trine to your ruler here in Aquarius in the second house. And so the real work here and responsibility and the structure is to transmute the emotional energy of the world around you in your resources and be this stable force. And I think this is what allows for a cutting back of what's not necessary, a cutting back of what is maybe distracting you in this way, or keeping you from actually taking what's around you and transmuting it, and kind of moving ahead of what you normally would be, where you normally would be at. And it also, that stability there in the medium itself allows for a little bit of relaxing into, like, it's okay. There will be more ideas. There will be more opportunities to organize myself, or to heal, or to come, to consider these ideas, explore this realm. But it's time to start cutting back here, right? It's time to start pruning back to what is actually going to bear fruit in the long run in terms of relationship. And when Venus comes into the seventh house in Cancer, this is where the sensitivity to the form of relationship and who you are in the relationship is going to become a lot more relevant. So lots of ideas. What's really clear is that the direction that we have come from at a soul level in Scorpio, in terms of the larger social, the social resonance as a whole, the communities, the associations, and really taking a stand here to obey your own conscience as beneficial as that has been and a source of power and momentum, it's really in the realm of your own voice, Capricorn, that the growth is really going to happen. The awakening is being stimulated, and certainly Mars is going to be, embedding itself in the medium of this growth as it moves through Taurus. And so it's hard for a Cap person to really focus on themselves without getting caught up in like really being kind of authoritarian or so caught up in that role that you really push people away because of it, right? And the feline archetype and the feline resonance, my gosh, is so related to the Lyran starseeds, especially lately for some reason, because that resonance is very much in that way. It's very, for the most part, the only real large cats that I know of that live in groups are lions. They're a whole other thing, right? They live in a pride. Otherwise, cats are very solitary. They are learning how to live more communally as a result of their relationship with humans. But lions have known all about that. That's very interesting to me. But Cap, I mean, they're going through it whether you like it or not. And so being very clear about who you want to grow into as a nurturer and a protector in your relationships is what the name of the game is all about. And so what have you learned in the last 2 years? The full moon in Capricorn, especially about who you are, it's going to be very clear. It's going to be full. And we're going to have a super moon, right? Because the full moon will be near its perigee, the part of the lunar orbit closest to Earth, right? And that's because Lilith is the apogee, the part that's furthest away. And so this is going to be pretty strong here, Cap. So let's go through some of the really big transits that are going to be happening in the relationships. Now, we already talked about Venus in a trine to Saturn. Like I said, very stabilizing, especially because Saturn's your ruler. Very stabilizing to the process of really cutting back, pruning back, being meticulous about it, being willing to give those ideas back to source. And I think part of that is that you realize that there's truly never getting rid of it. It's really just going back into the medium to enhance it. And that's part of the transmutation, right? And so there is a really strong, it's an air trine, right? With Venus and Saturn. And they really, that authority and that sensitivity in the realm of the 2nd and 6th house of your resources and what you're doing with them, very strong. Now, Mercury is going to be in a square to Chiron. Actually, just before coming into this full moon. Mercury in Cancer is in a square to Chiron in the 4th house. And remember what I said, as we go through this next 2 weeks, Chiron and Jupiter will both station retrograde in this area. The 4th house is the Cancerian house, but for you, Cap, it's really where your power comes from. Your personal power comes from your warrior energy. This is the Emperor card all day long. And for Chiron to station retrograde, and certainly for Jupiter to station retrograde, you're about to get a very deep, expansive journey into what has been holding you back here, where there has been wounding, how to tap into your inner master healer as opposed to your victim / savior in this area. And Jupiter in the 4th house, it's been expanding, but it's been holding the template of the big picture for where your power is coming from, right? And really giving a chance to, especially right now, to gaze upon the big picture. Now there's gonna be a really deep journey within, and it's almost gonna be, it's no way out in some ways of, you have to kind of go into the deeper parts of where you've come from, your family history, your customs, your lineage, right? Your national pride, your inner power, right? And this can go back to, an ancestral set of customs, a religious tradition, family karma. and this is about emotions, right? And so this is going to be very deep, and I think this is going to be very impactful for the months to come for Capricorn, because this is where your spark of life is truly felt, is in the realm of the fourth house, which is your personal life and your inner life, and where that comes from, and a sense of empowerment. It's going to be I think it's going to be very painful but very necessary, because without that, everything else is dysfunctional. Right? And so Mercury in a square to Chiron, right before it stations retrograde, is Mercury in the seventh house, right? It really putting a lot of the mental energy into the relationship land, the social identity. And you're getting a lot more from your interactions at a societal or a relational level than you would from any other type of learning when you have this. And so there's a strong identity, a strong mental focus on these themes of nurturing and protection, and your mental realm is very much connected. It's so much more intuitive when it's connected into this space of in some ways it's you in relationship is, I think it allows for a deeper sensitivity, right? Because the part of you that comes out in relationship, Cap, is the Cancerian nature. And when this containment is established, I think that it allows a much deeper, more thoughtful, and much more direct experience with your relationships. But it comes through kind of this hermetic process of Hermes, right? Or Osiris in a lot of ways, coming to meet Isis, right? And what is established there? There's a sense of brilliance. And so the connection with Mercury and Uranus is very favorable here, but the square to Chiron is the real challenge here, because without the ability to really generate power from this place to begin with, everything beyond it is not going to be, fully contained and secure. And I think that's very interesting. I think that it'll be more tempting to gain from the sextile, Mercury and Uranus sextile, than to lean into the discomfort of the growth, right? The growth that you really, on an intellectual level and a mental level, you understand what it takes, right? The seed has to be broken open, but there is a very strong trigger, there is a trauma it's like a callus that has built up for you, Capricorn, in the area of your inner life, your personal life, that doesn't want to break open. It just wants to continue to withdraw into this place and just generate some level of power. And with Chiron involved, you can bet that it is based on a deep wound, and deep wounds that have been imposed upon by out of your control. But you're starting to get it, right? And lean into the discomfort. Realize that there is also something brand new that's going to come in terms of your voice, your passion, your expression of who you are. That is that is also, it's an opportunity here with Mercury and Uranus. Remember, these are two octaves of the same general idea. Mercury being your own consciousness, Uranus being the collective consciousness, the sky god, right? The creator of life with the entity Gaia, right? This is Greek and like Roman mythology here. Uranus and Gaia create the Titans, right? So these are two octaves, right? Mercury is the individual consciousness. Uranus is the collective consciousness. And it's when we tap into this that we truly, really awaken to our full potential. So again, when you, Cap, allow for this, this sudden and maybe shocking, and certainly not allowing for any real stability in this area of the fifth house of maybe something is shocking, something is very electric here in your fifth house of how you really shine, and maybe it's innovative, right? Maybe you're experiencing some sort of outside of the box experience here. Revolution in your own heart is being initiated and has been with Uranus. And again, it's like when it's through that change in the resonance that is able to be applied to, and in some ways allow for this mental kind of growth around who you are in relationships, right? But it is shocking, right? And it is revolutionary. And it's often, especially in Taurus, it's not very comfortable, right? We want fixed earth to say fixed earth. We do not want bolts of lightning to come out. But that's because homeostasis is necessary. And that's a big part of what Uranus will trigger, is the rebalancing of things. So that is pretty substantial for you, Capricorn, during this whole, not only just full moon, but and to the end of this lunar cycle. So big changes, very very deep work in your own soul, right? Your own character, integrating your personality. This is where it happens, the fourth house. And when there are issues here, that personality has issues as well when it starts to express itself in this fifth house. So let's look beyond here and just get an idea. So we talked about this connection with the seventh and fifth house generally, because Mercury then will be in a sextile to the North Node. Venus, even though she's in a trine to Saturn, she's going to be in a square to Neptune right after this. So if we start moving ahead here, we can start looking at these particular transits. And keep in mind that the moon is now moving through the bottom of your chart. So not only is the full moon in the very nature of who you are, how you identify yourself, how others see you, your subjective experience, it's now moving through all of the individual identity and expression areas, and connecting into very powerful, large transpersonal experiences that are, really shaping who you are right now. So the first will be after Pluto, will be Saturn, and then in Neptune. So Venus is kind of, holding the physical and material embodiment and what you're doing about it, space before then the moon, that's really personal, emotional connection, passes over these points. So just like Venus was in a trine to Saturn, now the moon is going to meet Saturn, but Venus is in a square to Neptune. And through the week, Venus, or the moon, will come into your third house and meet Neptune. That's going to be pretty remarkable. So Venus in a square to Neptune. This is a mutable square. Neptune in Pisces, Venus in 25 to 26 degrees of Gemini, where you are in Orion territory. We're starting to come into conjunction and alignment with Betelgeuse or Betelgeuse in the armpit of Orion, the warrior, as he, raises the weapon, right? So there's a vulnerability there that is revealed in this degree. And 26 degrees Gemini is really just, everything gets stripped down to the bare essentials in the winter landscape, right? Trees are stripped bare. They're covered with frost. You have this like dreary winter sky. Maybe there's snow on the ground. But what that does is strips everything down to the bare essentials, because that there is life still happening, even in hibernation under the surface. But it's in the back and forth, the dichotomy, that we finally come down to recognize even the most base polarity within ourselves. And Gemini really does teach us that as it comes closer to the Cancerian archetype, the root system. So this square to Neptune, boy, Cap, let me tell you, Neptune retrograde has been a pretty, it's really interesting to experience it for yourself, but also to experience it with other people. And it's a glaring type of feeling right now with Neptune retrograde. It's like it's like the fog machine turns off, or the smoke machine turns off, or the fog burns away, the mist burns away, and it's a glaring and very powerful experience of the collective soul, right? Or the collective unconsciousness, or the human experience. All these things with Neptune and Pisces are completely accessible, right? So for Cap to have this in the third house, in terms of Neptune retrograde and the very clear but very powerful stream of the Akash, right, or the morphogenetic field, the woo, it is your consciousness, it's your everyday life where the boundaries are not even existent. Like, it is your consciousness, Capricorn, that acts as kind of the bridge in the Pisces, vesica, right? That there are these two positions that are concave, concave away, or convex, I guess, to each other. And the Pisces is the bridge, right? The human spirit, the compassion, unconditional love, the sense that we're all connected through God or source or the great spirit. And it's a feeling, right? It's a return to the ocean. So for the Capricorn person, this is already the nature of the world right in front of you, and how you engage it through your thoughts, through your learning, through discovery, exploration, the back and forth nature. It's seamless, right? It is imagination, it is magic, it is fantasy, it is cosmic consciousness. So Neptune here, and it has been here for years, is really just amplified and made this almost, there is no difference between your mind and what Neptune in Pisces is. It's just streaming into your personal experience, to your own personal nervous system, just the whole range of the collective unconscious, right? And it's, with Neptune moving direct, I mean, it's everything, and it can be very foggy. It can be very misty, right? You kind of have to get low to the ground if you want to find your way through. Now the mist is burned off, but the experience is still very much there. And people have either been painfully addressing where they've been deluding themselves, or they are doubling down on their fantasy, delusion, addiction, escapism, or it is just strengthening people's intuition in terms of the woo so much that it's almost seamless. So Capricorn, I think that the square to Neptune, the square to Venus, between Neptune and Venus, just post the full moon in your sign, I think that there is a sense of what you are taking in terms of your immediate environment, and what you are doing with that information to then organize your environment or your resources, if that makes sense. And so again, Venus still giving like this really, really deep meaning to the process of personal challenge or healing, and again, it's beyond just pruning now. It is the experience of everything being stripped away till there's nothing left but just the this and that. It's a very clear choice in this moment, and it's an experience of essentialization. Whereas the mind, I think, is still very much just plugged into the entire experience right in front of you, right? There's no difference between the humanitarian experience and your own mind and what's right in your everyday reality and in your consciousness, in your mind. There's a lot of, it's brought right to your doorstep, and there is nowhere to hide from it right now. And I think that normally the third house is the Gemini house, which I think is so interesting to have these really in square to each other, because this requires in some ways that you really do lean in. You lean into how uncomfortable, the process of stripping yourself down to the studs, okay, and really struggling to find a meaning when it could be very easy to escape in your own mind into a fantasy, right? Capricorn, it's just really important that you're just aware of this potential here, and to allow yourself to feel uncomfortable, and maybe not this time slip into the fantasy land in your own mind, and really find the meaning a deep meaning to the process of stripping things away and looking at them in kind of their raw form when it comes to organizing your life and, the process of bettering yourself, right? So the Venus aspect just gives it so much more value here. And in some ways, it's going to make it even harder to slip into your delusions and your fantasy land in your own mind. But it also is going to be really, I think, gives that sense of this is where the real value right here in front of me really is. There's nothing wrong with this. This is just a process of tapping into the feels of everything right through your own consciousness. It can be very overwhelming, and it can strip you down to nothing in this instance. And I think that that's something to just be aware of, Capricorn, especially as you are really coming to terms with the last 2 years and how you feel about yourself and what about yourself internally really needs to go, so that you can develop and come into and find yourself in new social identity in relationships, because there's something very primal about this, and it's very easy to be like, I don't need anybody, right? Well, that's not true. And I think, again, this fourth house is where a lot of the work needs to happen to see how those things have come about. If you're guaranteed you're having issues in some sort of social identity or relationship, and you have for a very long time, Capricorn, it's just now come to a real big head and based on the last 2 years. So this can be very general too, Capricorn, in terms of your social identity with society as a whole, right? It may not be anything in particular, or you may be so ahead of the curve here that you are like, yep, I know exactly what needs to go. I'm like way ahead of it, and this full moon is just, I'm gonna just catapult that full moon energy and let it just flow out of me emotionally. I think that's possible too, especially with Pluto involved. You can tap into places you didn't even know existed within you, powers that you didn't even know were there. And that is the upside of this, Capricorn, is the chrysalis that you're coming out of as a person because of Pluto. So, there's a Cazimi on the 16th. Let's look at that. There's a Mercury Cazimi in your 7th house. So this also is a Starseed activation for Procyon. We're going to be talking a lot about that in the Catalyst Classroom. I'm going to be dropping that this week. There's going to be a special treat for those who are subscribed to that tier on Subscribestar. You'll have access to, of course, the presentation. And there's going to be an added bonus channeling for you about Procyon. So this is where the Cazimi is going to be happening, 24 to 25 degrees Cancer. So if you're interested in that, there is information in the description box about how to subscribe through Subscribestar, and on Telegram and Facebook. I have and the email list as well. I put out the promotional material for all this stuff so you can get a better idea. But this is where the Mercury Cazimi happened in your 7th house. And so talk about like an endowment, right? If you are on the right track here, Capricorn, you really are invested in identifying being a protector and a nurturer in your relationships, to really be that container system and discover your own vulnerability here in these relationships. Then this moment here will be kind of like this endowment, like providence coming in, because you've created the space, right? You've created the space because of the full moon. You establish what it is you really want, who you really want to be in these relationships, how you want to feel and express yourself in them. And it showed what deeply within yourself needs to be, lovingly, but maybe forcefully flushed out, and, accept defeat gracefully so you can learn. And in this moment, if that space was created, wow, this is such a beautiful, powerfully emotional endowment that is a brilliant realization and an intuition, right? Like just a total download in some ways. I would say even more like an upload, because it is establishing your root system has been established to the point where you can really open up a space that allows for that, it's not superior power, but truly your higher self and a sense of connection to life in general, to show itself, right? To come in. Whew, that's going to be really powerful. This is, oh my God, we're only talking about like the next three to 4 days from when I'm recording this. So you also see that Lilith is going to be in a sextile to Mars, is in a square to Jupiter, right? This is the same relationships that we've been talking about, the 7th and 5th house, your own voice, your passion, your thrill, your joy, your optimism and excitement, how that is part of the transmuting of self into relationship, how these two are so linked together in a harmonious way. And then, of course, it's where the power comes from to begin with that is causing always in conflict to the social identity, because there is something that you give away here. There is something that is at cross purposes, right? Because you are in everything that has been generated in terms of your character and personality through a very dedicated practice here in the 6th house is given away, right? This is where the seed is shown. This is where the harvest happens, the 7th house, and this is where you establish yourself in relationships. So there is something that is an equilibrium or a fairness that is established or try to establish, and that fundamentally is at cross purposes with where your character is being developed. You have to give it over to something. So again, Lilith is here directly linking us to something so primal. And in terms of relationship. And so again, Chiron and Jupiter, right? Jupiter is all hot air. It's great. And especially in Aries, I mean, it is just like, I have the big picture of everything that I can be. Be all that you can be, right? Jupiter and Aries. And it is about to station retrograde. And so that whole lens of the big picture is going to be directed inward. And the expansion, I think, will be significant and deeper and wider, like wider and deeper than you ever thought possible, Capricorn. But it's going to come through a very deep pain, having to walk through that fire again, because especially in its retrograde now. So just keep that in mind. These are territories that are going to be crossed over later when these are back in prograde. So let's see what else. The 17th. So we have the Cazimi and Mercury and the Sun are both going to trine Neptune on the 17th. This is the Sunday the 17th, the Capricorn. So again, this 7th house. Now this is a trine to Neptune. The Moon is about to be in a conjunction with Neptune. So there is some benefit here, and in some ways you see that there is a kite that's forming. It's not exact, but it's within, I'd say within 3 degrees, 4 degrees of the nodal axis. So you see a very stable emotional capacity here that has to do with your consciousness and how it is able to grasp and seamlessly connect to the cosmic consciousness. With the Moon here meeting Neptune in this area, it's going to really it's going to be so powerful in your dream state, in your meditations, in any of the ways that you mentally interact with the world around you, and the means in which your nervous system is functioning, right? I mean, this is just such a beautiful connection here. And again, Procyon, absolutely. And a sense of when you are really following your divine pathway within your own consciousness, there is something that it allows you to be fully satisfied in your relationships. There is something, there is a standard of information here that is transmitted by this. I don't. There's going to be a very strong, sensitive connection to what your path has been in this way and what it could be, and really going back over and being very clear with yourself about the the divine and sacred pathway of your own consciousness and what that really means, because this is, again, it's going to have this direct connection with Mercury and the sun. Like, this is so beautiful. This is such a beautiful cosmic transcendental awareness that is going to come through your own mind, your own consciousness, your own language, right? Your own communication skills, your own sense of connection to the world. I think it's going to be really beautiful here. These moments here after the full moon are so important before we get to our first quarter, before we get to the first quarter square, which of course will have to be in your fourth house, Capricorn, right? Where all the real action and deep, painful healing is going to be happening. And in fact, it's going to be in a T-square with the Sun Pluto opposition. So let's actually look at that. So not only is there this trine, this water trine, then you have Venus coming into Cancer on the 18th. And so then the sensitivity to the experience of the relationships itself. And Venus loves to be in the 7th house. And in Cancer, this is so sweet and so loving and so just, the identification with the means of nurturing and a sense of motherhood, right? This is that transition in some ways, identifying more with the emotional boundaries in some ways and how important they are. And the meaning of relationships for love and solidarity too is going to start coming online. So, but what happens is that the moon moves into Aries, and then we have our Chiron retrograde. We have our Sun and Mercury are both in opposition to Pluto, right? So the fear factor about what you're losing within yourself, or a sense of tension with identifying and conceptualizing who you are in relationships versus this really deep, powerful transformation. I think this is going to be a moment of balking in some ways, but at the same time, Venus and Lilith are conjunct right here, pretty much in your 7th house as well. So this is this moment of remember where you came from, remember in your bodies, in this deep sense of almost survival of who you are in relationship and being able to provide this. While at the same time, the experience of what can be lost in relationship, or in a sense of relationship, when there are deep processes happening in the individual. Boy, that's going to be, like I said, there's going to be, this whole opposition in general is just going to be absolutely remarkable. And I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but for you, Capricorn, I feel a moment of real, of losing. There may be a real fear of losing someone, or a real pain around what has been lost, but also at the same time, a sense of returning back to a deeper sense of family and connection. So that's going to be on the 19th. The moon meets Chiron, adds its stationing. Oh my. And then on the 20th, there's going to be the third quarter moon, and it's going to be in a T-square to that opposition with the Sun and Pluto retrograde in your 1st house, and we can see it pretty clearly right here, my friends, this T-square. So this will be in conjunction with Andromeda Galaxy, big activation for Andromeda Starseeds, big activation, especially the whole thing, right? Because Procyon is involved, opposite Cancer, the Sun in Cancer, right? So this is a big Procyon, and then Andromeda Galaxy as the T-square. So the Sun and the moon in a 3rd quarter square. This is a crisis in consciousness, an inner reorientation. I think that there will be a deep sensitivity here, Capricorn, to letting go well, not even letting go, but being able to face your own disappointment and your own pain in this level of who you are, right? Where your power comes from, that warrior energy in your personal life or your private life, your inner feels, because you're going to need it. I think that that's important to connect into, especially in terms of being able to really redirect the and stabilize in some ways the tension, find the fulcrum here through this moon in the fourth house, conjunct Andromeda galaxy, right? These are starseeds who are on the front lines of social revolution, because freedom, liberty, independence, self-responsibility is their MO, right? And so tapping into this for all of us is going to be important, and especially if you also are an Andromeda starseed and happen to be a Capricorn person, this is going to be this could also, this is going to take some serious courage, and it's also going to take a serious sense of agency, and the moon is really going to help with this, so that you don't get pulled into a real strong experience of fear of loss, or of what's going, maybe an overcompensation of protection of who you are in relationship because of the changes that are happening within you. So this is the 20th of July. This is our third quarter moon, and Chiron is now officially retrograde. So then Mercury comes into Leo on the 19th, like I said. So Mercury is in your 8th house at this point. The sun enters Leo, your 8th house, and so this is where the action starts to really focus on the realm of power, right? And of power dynamics. This is something you know all about, Capricorn, because this is where your light really shines, is in the area of shared resources, because that's what a business is based on. So there's trust, there's intimacy here, there's sexual energy, there are business resources that are shared. This is returns on investments in the 8th house, all of these things. This is what you're doing it all for. And so they come into this realm at this last quarter. Let's look here. And, Mercury is able to function and be a real investigator in this 8th house. So that's really useful, as long as it's not all about you all the time. That's how this 5th house area with Mars and the North Node and Uranus and then the moon at this point is so important, because it's your voice that is, and the 5th house that is such a Leo type of thing. You want this to be really established and strong and resonant, so that when you come into the 8th house, you know what it is that you are participating in, what you're investing into, what you expect to get out of it. And this is where the energy will be. So the big ones around this last quarter moon are Mercury is going to be in the 8th house, is going to be in a trine to Jupiter. Let's look here. And the sun as well. Hold on one second. Sorry, guys. There we go. So Mercury in the 8th house for you, Caps, trine to Jupiter. So this is where especially because Jupiter is going to stay in retrograde. There's something very important here about wrapping your mind and investigating what it feels like, how to act on in your speech, your communication, your discovery, your exploration in these darker or depth-oriented realms. Like I said, this is about return on investments. This is about the dark night. This is about in the realm of the shadow. What it means to really act in togetherness. Everybody participating by adding their own unique voice to this area. And again, this is going to be when you can establish that big picture of who you are in your private life, in your own feels, your sensitivity, your emotional vulnerability, right? Where does your character develop? This is really important to consider while Jupiter is still in its prograde, because the balance here to a Mercury in Leo is how that voice and how that power is expressed in terms of a collective emotional situation, or where the power is generated resource wise in relationship. It really does have a lot to do with your own character. So knowing your character, having the big picture of your character established is really important, the integrity here, so that your sense of how to participate in this area is established and foundational. Now, trines, you don't have to do anything. So if the big picture of who you are is all, is all hot air and blowing smoke here, then it's still going to stabilize your mind's work and objectivity in this area and how it's problem solving in terms of, okay, now how do I actually do this, right? So don't get too caught up in what this feels like right away, because Jupiter is stationing retrograde. So believe me, there's more to learn here. There's a deeper well to dig. There really is, or a bigger a more expansive map of the root system that is about to unfold. So, but this is a good place to start, right? I think so. Because again, the power realm, this Leo, boy, oh boy, Capricorn, you're one of the most dangerous people, because if this is narcissism in this area, you really can do some damage, okay? So it's important to really be aware of the patterns of who you are and what is being activated or being challenged, so that you don't fall into the trap of exploiting and manipulating people here by virtue of just being yourself. So Mercury trine Jupiter. Venus is going to square Jupiter. That's the other thing. So this is maybe a trine, but Venus keeping it real, squaring Jupiter about like, okay, well, the sensitivity and the sense of value here is in the nature, the balance of the relationship, and specifically a purity and understanding, or something elusive that you can't really capture, but is there. And that's going to square Jupiter, because, again, Jupiter has got a big head right now about like, this is who I am and where my power comes from, Capricorn. And Venus is going to be like, you don't actually, the mystery of the relationship is the value here, not necessarily just your character. So that square is going to be a reality check right away, Cap, when that happens. So Mercury is going to square Mars. So here is the square. Mercury is going to make 2 Mars. Let's see what day that is. We're looking towards the end of this lunar cycle, actually. So let's start going ahead here. This is the end of the month. So there we go. We saw it again. Venus squaring Jupiter. There's Mercury squared to Mars in the 5th house. So the resonance of the individual in conflict to the power of the sharing and the communion, cooperation, right? The return on investment here is that's going to be established as well. Mars being very patient, really developing character under adversity, really taking a calculated, patient risk, and having the fortitude to really handle the intensity in this area, whereas Mercury really wants to just demonstrate, right? And like, look at what I can do, look at what I've accomplished. Let me dramatize my efforts and put them on a platform and parade through this area of death, sex, and taxes, even if it's in this way of like establishing this mental proficiency in this area, right? This square here is Mars is like, you got to earn it. You got to earn it in like the action, right? And you got to, it's in the really wanting it, really desiring it, that you have to, kind of face and brave the storm. That's going to also be pretty relevant for you, Capricorn, as things move forward. You also see that the moon and Lilith are conjunct in Cancer, again, square to Jupiter, right? This was the new moon, was in square to Jupiter. So this theme's coming right back up again in order for you to see it at the dark moon before we go into our new moon in Leo, which is happening on the 28th. So let's see here. Mercury is in a trine to Chiron retrograde. This, again, the togetherness, right? The sense of, okay, how do I do this? How do I be together, right? How do I establish my resonance? I think that this trine is going to be a lot more, I don't want to say frustrating, but clarifying. In it's harmonious because it's a fire trine, but Chiron is retrograde. I think it's going to be actually more enlightening to what has been causing dissonance in this area, if that makes sense. Coming to the very dark moon, oh my gosh. And then on the 28th, this is when we have the new moon in Leo. And what else do we see? The new moon in Leo, it's going to be in a, let's see here. The thing that I want to bring up about this is it is going to be the challenge and the relativity of values in this realm that is going to be very much highlighted at this new moon in the 8th house, right? But what's important about this Leo energy is the number that happening. We also know that it's going to, there's still squares happening to, and Mercury in particular squaring this whole complex that is going to be conjunct with each other on the 1st of August, right? And Mercury in Leo that is attempting to really establish an identification with that, again, that solar energy, that creative expression. And something has to be really moved out of the way. Something new is rising out of your voice that is really challenging and conflicting your, how you are, addressing in a very objective way, and certainly a very self-focused way. This identification with your own creative expression. I just feel like it's going to be very difficult for you to really establish this in your mind and your communication, being able to mentally and objectively identify with this energy as there is a lot of things happening here on the 1st. In this area. That is the area of your creative expression. And we're leading truly up to the Lion's Gate, which is the 8th. The 8-8 is the Lion's Gate, and this is going to be, oops, I want to make sure we look at this because I want to look at it for everybody, and we're really kind of culminating here. So the Lion's Gate is this heliacal rising of Sirius. That means it's rising in the pre-dawn sky, and that was a pretty clear indication to the Egyptians that the Nile was going to flood soon. And Sirius being the vessel that holds the water, representing the divine mother of the earth herself, holding the floodwaters that nurture and nourish the lands in order for there to be grain, right? Egypt was the breadbasket of the ancient world. So the Lion's Gate is when the sun moves from the combustion to the release. It is the passing through the threshold here when the sun is at halfway between Leo and Sirius is rising in the pre-dawn sky. And for you, again, this is the 8th house. And there's going to be Venus opposite Pluto at this moment as well. And so what had been more of an identification, more of a creative expression, more of a spiritual sustainment is about to be embodied in the very feelings associated with our relationships. And so remember that 4th house, right? Because there's this Lion's Gate sun is in a trine to Chiron. So again, this is how we really identify with the means in which we all participate together to create something. And the benefit, the light here is being able to see how your own character and how it's developed, like where your wounds are, and really seeing them clearly and how they have impacted the ability to really walk through. And in some ways, this will be the threshold, Capricorn, that you walk through at the Lion's Gate, because like I said, you're going through major transformation of who you are. So, wow, that's great. Capricorn, the transformation is great. And I looked at the time and I was just like, oh, this is perfect. So I'm going to leave it there for you, Capricorn. A couple announcements to share with you, just so you are aware. If you're not on the email list, if you're not following Catalyst Energies on Telegram, those things are certainly available to link to in the description box below. But I wanted to share with you, number one, that if you are interested in your Starseed origins and you don't know because you haven't had a reading with me or any of the anybody does Starseed astrology, I'm still offering the Starseed readings at a discount, 25%. So you can go to the website, catalystenergies.net. It's in the description box below, and that will take you to the website and you can book that. So that's being offered at $66. And normally I request that you have a natal reading first, or you are really familiar with your natal chart, because it's pretty essential. But in order to get yourself up to speed with your Starseed markings in your chart, I'm offering that. Now for return clients, I'm offering the Starseed Appreciation, and this is just 30-minute check-in. It's a recording. It's for return clients only. It's only $27. So again, you can book that through catalystenergies.net from the homepage. You'll see that flyer and it'll give you an option to book or request the reading. So those are my only real announcements, Capricorn. Oh, the other thing I wanted to share is that since it's your month and I am putting this forecast out publicly, you also have the option, and I don't have the flyer on me, but again, if you're on Telegram, Facebook, or on the email list, you've already known that this month the lunar transit readings are also being offered as a discount. So a 30-minute recording is $33, and we're looking at your chart, progressions, natal chart, your starseed markings, in relation to the lunar cycle. So an hour is $66, half hour. So a half hour reading, Capricorn, is perfect to look at the rest of the lunar cycle, right? To be like, oh, okay, this is how it's going to happen. So you take this reading, get the general overview, and then you book that reading and you get something way more personalized to you and answer some direct questions through that reading. So, get connected so you know what I'm offering and when. Thank you so much for being here, Capricorn. I truly appreciate you. You are going through some of the toughest transition right now and have been for a long time. So please take care of yourself. Let me know if I can do anything for you. My email is in the description box below. Whoops. And I will be seeing you guys on our next transmission, which I believe will be the Catalyst Astrology Report on Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. See you then, guys. Take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for Capricorn for being here. I really mean that. You are really setting the tone for the transformation because it's happening in your very identity. So real warrior stuff going on for you guys. So I'm proud of you, and I am very grateful for your presence. So in the meantime, take care. See you later, Capricorn.